And welcome back to episode 4 of Pong Redux. In this episode, I will add motion to the ball. We're going to set things in motion this time around. Let's get started. So, as with all of this stuff, there are multiple ways that you can do things. The first thing I want to do is talk very briefly about the random number function, because when we click go or start or serve or whatever, we set the ball in motion. We might want it to move upward and we might want it to move downward, and probably we want that to be random, like a coin toss, like half the time it goes up, half the time it goes down. We need a command that will, be true half the time and false half the time, or it will give a 1 half the time and a 0 half the time. So let's put that in. I put this outside the draw loop, just above it, and we're going to start first with an if statement. And actually, this is going to be an if else, so it's the fourth block down. Like I said, random number. If we have a random number that's either 0 or 1, we could make that work because it's going to be 0 half the time and 1 half the time. So we could do random number 0, 0, 1, and that should work. But it doesn't really make sense in the statement right now if random number 0, 1, because that's going to return a 0 or a 1. So it's going to say if 0 or if 1. And that's not a Boolean statement. We need to say if something equals something else, or something is not equal or greater than or less than or what have you. So I'm actually going to pull this back out. And I'm just going to type in here if random number 1 equals 0. So that might look a little weird to you because I only have one argument in the parentheses here, and don't we need a minimum number and a maximum number? We actually don't. If you don't put two arguments in there, the computer assumes that your minimum number is 0. So this is the same thing as random number 0, 1. It's just abbreviated. So that's going to return a number from 0. That's going to return a number that's either 0 or 1. And if it's a 0, well, 0 equals 0, that's true. Then it's going to do whatever commands we put here. If it's a 1, then 1 does not equal 0, so that's false. So it's going to skip those commands and it's going to do what's in the else part of the statement. So just so I can remember how this works, I'm going to put a comment here. If it's true, we're going to send the ball downward. And if it's false, we're going to send the ball upward. And I'm going to use another block or another function, a command, that we haven't learned yet. Did we use it previously? I don't think we did. It's exactly the same as the counter pattern, but it's not exactly the same. There's some important differences, but it's very, very similar to the way the counter pattern moves, right? Because if we want to send the ball downward, we would use a counter pattern that would increment the ball's y position, like ball.y equals ball.y plus 1. Or if we wanted to send it upward, ball.y equals ball.y minus 1. There's actually an abbreviation for that, a function that works, and it's the velocity, or the velocity property of the ball, of the sprite. We can, to make things easier, just use this block, sprite.velocity_y. So if I pull that one of those in each part here, I can say ball.velocity_y equals, and how fast we want our ball to move. I think 7 is what I had it. We want the ball to move slower than the paddle, right? Slower than the player. Otherwise, the player can't move to catch up with it. So let's try 7. And downward is the positive y direction, so we can just drop a 7 in there. Ball.velocity_y equals 7 is exactly the same thing as saying ball.y equals ball.y plus 7. This is literally the counter pattern. And if we want to go upward, then we just subtract. So this would be a -7. So half the time it's going to go up, half the time it's going to go down by 7 pixels each frame through the draw loop. Actually, that's not right. This isn't in the draw loop. That's one of the important differences between the velocity and the counter pattern. If we used a counter pattern here, this would have to be in the draw loop because it updates every click through the game, through the draw loop. You can use ball.velocity y outside of the draw loop, and it's as if you're creating a counter pattern and putting it in the draw loop. Let's try it and see if it works. Sure enough, it went down that time. And it goes up as well. And it appears to be completely random. Well, 50% of the time it goes down versus up. Nice. Okay. Well, obviously we don't want the ball just to go straight down or straight up. We want it to also have some motion in the horizontal direction. So for that, we use sprite.velocity x. So I'm going to pull these in. And that we don't want the same every time either, because then it would go diagonally in the same direction every time. We want to introduce some randomness. So we're going to use random number again here. And we could say that ball.velocity x equals a random number between -7 and 7. So sometimes it will be going left, sometimes it will be going right. And the speed at which it is moving left or right changes, because you could get anything between -7 and 7, including 0. Let's copy this down into this other one. I could just get rid of this one. I think that'll do it. Nice. We now have a ball that moves in a random direction each time as the game starts. That looks good. So this is looking much better. Obviously, though, it's not a game yet because we don't have collisions. The ball just moves off the screen. So we need to handle the code that will make the ball bounce off of not only the players, but the left wall and the right wall. So that's what's coming up in the next one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in part 5.